Thanks for joining us here at New Song Church, where we're helping people to know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. If you have any questions at all, or just want to learn more about us as a church, you can go to mynsc.org/happenings. It's the best way to stay connected with us throughout the week. And now, check out this week's sermon.
Obviously, I'm not Pastor Justin. He's speaking at a sister church this morning, so he asked me to kind of fill in for him today, which I'm happy to do. So I'm glad I'm here today, and I hope you are glad you are here today too. In fact, I hope you are really, really glad you're here today. And I know what reality is. I know that sometimes we can't always say that as much as we would like to. I know there have been many, many times over the years that I've gotten up on Sunday morning and I'm like, oh man, I just don't feel like going today. I just don't feel like, being in the crowd of people and dealing with the things that, I just don't want to go today. And my wife would turn to me and say, you have to, you're the pastor. And so I know what it's like, but I want to help you be super glad that you're here. And I want to do that by relaying an observation that one of my favorite authors made as he was on a plane heading for a speaking engagement. Max Lucado was on that plane, and he wrote down these words. He said, people on a plane and people at church have a lot in common. All are on a journey. Most are well-behaved and presentable. Some doze, others gaze out the window or look at their phones, but most, if not all, are satisfied with a predictable experience. For many, the mark of a good flight and the mark of a good worship service are the same. Nice, we like to say. Thank you, it was a nice flight. Thank you, it was a nice worship service. We exit the same way we came in, and we're happy to return the next time. A few, however, are not content with just nice. They long for so much more. The boy who just passed me did. I heard him even before I saw him. I was already in my seat when he asked, do you think they'll let me meet the pilot? He was either lucky or shrewd because he made the request just as he came into the plane, and his question floated into the cockpit, causing the pilot to open the door and lean out and say, someone looking for me? The little boy's hand shot up like he was answering his second grade teacher's question. I am. Well, come on in, invited the pilot. And with a nod from his mom, the youngster entered the cockpit's world of controls and gauges, and he emerged minutes later with eyes wide. Wow, he exclaimed. I am so glad to be on this plane. No one else's face showed such wonder. I know because the boy's interest piqued mine, so I started studying the faces of the passengers around me, but I didn't find any enthusiasm like his. I mostly saw contentment. Travelers content to be on the plane, content to be closer to their destination, content to be out of the airport, content to sit and stare and say little. Oh, there were a few exceptions. The 5 or so ladies wearing straw hats and carrying beach bags weren't content. They were exuberant. They giggled all the way down the aisle. My guess is they were moms set free from the kitchen and the kids. The guy across the aisle from me in the blue suit, well, he wasn't content. Quite honestly, he was kind of grouchy. He opened his laptop and he scowled at the screen for the entire trip. But most of us were happier than he and more contained than the ladies. Most of us were content with a predictable, uneventful, nice flight. And since that's what we sought, that's what we got. The boy, on the other hand, well, he wanted so much more. He wanted to see the one flying the plane. If asked to describe the flight, he wouldn't just say nice. He'd likely produce the plastic wings they gave him and say, I got to be with the pilot. Do you see why I say that people on a plane and people at a church service have a lot in common? Look around the church sanctuary and look at the faces. Oh, there are a few who are giggly. There might even be some who are cranky. But by and large, we're content. Content to be here, content to sit and look straight ahead, to leave when the service is over, content to enjoy a nice worship service. But what difference would it make if before continuing in our worship journey, in our worship service today, if we were invited into the cockpit and we truly saw the pilot? What if we were invited into the door of heaven and we truly saw the one that we've actually come here to worship today? Would that make a difference in our lives? Well, today I'd like for us to kind of take a field trip by joining with the Apostle John on the day that he was actually invited into that space. In Revelation chapter 4, the first couple of verses sound a lot like that little boy's experience when he was on that plane. Notice what it says in Revelation 4, verse 1. John said, I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. It was like the door to the cockpit just opened up. And the voice that I first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, come up here and I will show you what must take place after this. John was invited into the very cockpit of heaven, into the very presence of the one who was there. And that's what he saw when he got there. Look in verse 2. And there before me was a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. John was invited into the very presence of the pilot, the one who is at the controls, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And by the way, that's really what the book of the Revelation is about. The book of the Revelation isn't just about future things, which is what we really want it to be about. My wife and I have started a study together. We've just kind of had our ears perked up with the events that are going around the world today, and we're kind of going, is the last trumpet going to blow? Is Jesus going to come? And we wonder if we can maybe find some of the signs that are described. And so we've been opening up the book of the Revelation, kind of studying future things or last things. But you know what? This book isn't just about last things. In fact, if we went to chapter 1, verse 1, the first 5 words of this book is actually the title of the book. And the title of the book isn't the revelation of last things or the revelation of future events. It is called the revelation of Jesus Christ. This whole book reveals to us the character, the nature, the greatness, the awesomeness of the ascended Jesus Christ who is sitting on his throne. And that's what the book is all about. And in the process of describing and revealing what Jesus is like, it also describes what takes place around his pilot seat, so to speak. And every time what takes place there is the same every time somebody is invited there. In fact, the book of the Revelation records for us 5 visits John was able to make into the very throne room of Jesus. And every time he got there, what was taking place was the same. And every other description we have in the Bible of that place is the same. What's happening there is worship. And not just casual, nice, contented kind of worship. The kind of worship that happens around his throne is this wonder-filled sense of awe, amazing God that I can pour out my spirit and my words to because I want to just worship him with everything I have. That's the kind of worship that's taking place around God's throne. Not just a nice worship service, but awesome worship. And so what we want to do here this morning is kind of draw from that example that we have of what worship actually should be like right here and right now, because you know what? We don't have to wait till we get to heaven to experience the presence of Jesus Christ. He told us where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, he will be here with us. So he is today. We are gathered in his name. So he's right here. So the question is, are we just going to have a nice, contented worship service? Or are we going to have a wonder-filled time of worshiping the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? So I just want to examine John's first trip to that throne room here this morning, and let's find an example of how we are to be worshiping Jesus today. That first visit basically describes 3 elements that transform worship from thank you, it was a nice service, to wow, I am so glad to be on this journey today. 3 elements that turn a routine church service into wonder-filled worship. So let's probe those elements by asking 3 questions. The first one is prompted by John's description of some creatures that are always there around Jesus' throne. We call them angels. And it's interesting how John describes those angels, probably different than the image that you've already got in your mind, because we have these images of what we think angels are probably like. And sometimes we're told, angels are like cute little chubby baby cherubs with wings. I don't know where we get that image. I don't know who started saying that that's what angels look like, because the Bible never describes them as fat little baby cherubs. Or maybe you're thinking, because I hear some guys say, and it's wonderful that they say, my wife, she is just an angel. Guys, you don't want your wife to look like what's described here in this passage, because angels aren't beautiful, serene women with halos. Okay, notice what John said, chapter 4, verse 6, about halfway through the verse. In the center and around the throne were 4 living creatures. We know these creatures are angels because of other descriptions that are given, but notice the description. And they were covered with eyes in front and in back. Jump down to verse 8. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under his wings. You go, whoa, what is that all about? I've never thought of angels being head to toe eyeballs, front and back, even under their wing pits. They've got eyeballs everywhere. Okay, what is that all about? And the question really isn't, what are angels like? That's really the wrong question we're asking here. The description was made so that we can ask not what it is like and what they look like, but what they look at. And that's the whole point of this description. So our first question is, what is the focus of worship? What is the focus of your worship? What should the focus of my worship be? Because those angels had the capacity and the ability to look in all directions at the same time. They were like the ultimate multitaskers. I mean, they could pay attention to dozens, scores of things at the same time. But the point is, what do they pay attention to, even though they can look in every direction? What do they pay attention to when they're in the presence of Jesus? Notice what it says in verse 8. It says, these angels with eyes that can look everywhere, day and night, they never stop saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. The point is, all eyes were on Jesus, even though they could have been looking elsewhere. All eyes were on Jesus. And the whole time they're in his presence, they never stop looking at Jesus, and they never stop saying those words. It's interesting, if we compared this event or this time at the throne room with the same experience that Isaiah had 700 years earlier. 700 years earlier, Isaiah was invited into the throne room of God as well. And what he described in the throne room was exactly the same. He said there were angels with 6 wings, and they said, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The exact same words. For 700 years they had been saying it, because as long as they're around the throne, they never stop focusing on the one who is on the throne, the one who is at the controls. So here's the lesson. If we are going to experience wonder in worship, we must direct our focus to the pilot, to the one who is at the controls. All eyes must be on him and his majesty and his greatness and his sovereignty and his right and ability to direct and control our lives. One of the reasons why we just have a nice church service is because our mind's eyes, and we're a lot more like those angels up here in between here than we are physically, but because our mind's eyes can look all over the place in every direction almost at the same time, right? We can focus on so many different things. And one of the main things that we can focus on is ourselves. George Barna is kind of a worship statistician or a church statistician. He takes a lot of surveys about church life and about Christian life. And recently I read one of his surveys. He asked people who had indicated that they worship on a regular basis. They go to church on a regular basis. They worship at least twice a month, okay? So these people worship often, and he asked them to complete this sentence. He said, complete the sentence. I have had a positive worship experience if. Okay, and I'm going to give you the top 5 answers that 87% of those people who were asked to fill in that sentence said one of these 5 things. I have had a positive worship experience if my needs are met. I have had a positive worship experience if I get to see my friends. I've had a positive worship experience if we sing the songs that I like. I've had a positive worship experience if the preacher is interesting. That one really makes me nervous. I've had a positive worship experience if the service isn't too long, or in other words, if it doesn't take too much of my time. Okay, these are actual answers by people who claim to worship, but where is their focus? Their focus is on self. The focus is on me, what I need, what I want, what I prefer. But the focus around God's throne room isn't on the angels. They're not thinking about themselves. They're looking at the one who's worthy to be praised. And so we've got to change the focus if we don't want to just have a nice worship service. If we want it to be wonder-filled, we've got to change our focus, because worship isn't about me. You might have heard of a guy by the name of Matt Redmond. He writes a lot of worship songs. I love some of his songs, love to sing them. One time several years ago, he was serving as a worship pastor in a church, and the church got all caught up in what we call the worship wars. People were expressing all kinds of opinions about the music in the church, and so they were going back and forth. Should we sing more contemporary music or more traditional music? And there were all kinds of opinions, and they were trying all kinds of different things, and they were divided about the volume. We need it louder. We need it quieter. And they were divided about how many songs they sang. We sing too many. We don't sing enough. And so this was going back and forth and back and forth. And finally, the senior pastor of the church just threw up his hands and said, I don't know what else to do. So what he decided to do was just pull the plug on the whole thing. And people came to church one day, and he said, until we can get a sense from God how we're supposed to worship him in music, we're just going to sit here quiet and listen for his voice. And they did. And Matt Redmond said it was so awkward. We just sat there and we just started praying and said, God, how do you want us to worship you? And when he was praying, some words started coming to his mind. And in the silence, he actually wrote a song. And the song goes something like this. When the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come longing just to bring something that's of worth that would bless your heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you, Jesus. It's all about you. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it, because it's all about you. It's not about me. And that will change our worship from mundane, casual, to wonder-filled when it becomes about him. And that's what those around the throne were seeing, and that's what those around the throne were doing, which prompts another question coming from others who were around the throne as well. Notice what it says in verse 4, Revelation 4:4. Surrounding Jesus' throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white, and they had crowns of gold on their head. And we go, who are these guys? And the honest answer to the question is we really don't know. We don't know who they were or who they are, other than they are people that Jesus said, in my kingdom, as I'm ruling, I want you to help me to rule and to reign. And so these are kind of assistant rulers that were around Jesus' throne. But the most important question isn't who are they? The question is, what are they saying and what are they doing when they are around Jesus' throne? Which brings us to question number 2. What is the function of our worship? What's the function of my worship? What is my worship and your worship supposed to do? What's supposed to happen when we are here? And that's answered by the words and the actions of those elders. Notice what it says in verse 11. This is what they say when they are around the throne room of Jesus. They say, you are worthy, our Lord and our God, to receive. And I want to stop right there, because even that phrase tells us so much about wonder-filled worship. Wonder-filled worship expresses Jesus' worthiness. It expresses Jesus' worthiness. In other words, it expresses what he is worth. You know what the literal meaning of worship is? It's actually, worship comes from an Old English word. We have a shortened version of it, but the Old English word was worthship. Worthship. It was declaring to God what he is really worth to you. It's declaring to Jesus, Jesus, this is how much you are worth to me. You see, the true worth of something is what you will give for it. The true worth of something to you is what you will give for it. I want to illustrate it this way by showing you a painting. Okay, how much is this painting worth to you? If you saw that painting at a yard sale or an auction, how much would that painting be worth to you? If I stumbled across that painting at your yard sale, I doubt that I'd give you $1 for it. Looking at that painting, I'm going, I don't know that I really want third grade art in my house. And I guarantee you, if I gave you $1 for it and I took it home, my wife would tell me I paid too much, because she wouldn't hang that on her wall. So that painting, to me, wouldn't be worth $1. But to somebody who really loved and understood and appreciated the artist, whose name is, by the way, Richard Diebenkorn, that painting was worth more than $1. In fact, that painting sold at an auction a year ago for a little more than $1. In fact, he paid $46.4 million for that painting. And I'm trying to imagine what that guy's wife said when he brought that painting home. Well, Con, look what I bought you today at the auction. No, it sold at Christie's auction for $46.4 million. Why? Because that painting was worth that to that man. That something's true worth to you is what you're willing to give for it. So let me ask you the question. What is Jesus worth to you? By the way, that's why we take offerings when we worship. You know, we don't take up a collection because we need to pay the bills. We don't take up an offering because we're focused on money. It's not about that. We include an offering in a worship service because it gives us the opportunity to, in a very substantial way, say, Lord Jesus, this is what you are worth to me. And if I had 1,000,000 times more than this, it would be what you are worth to me. And I want to give you something that's of worth, like Matt Redmond said. So what is Jesus worth to you? What was he worth to those elders who were in his presence? You are worthy, it says in verse 11, you are worthy, our Lord and our God, to receive glory. Glory literally means radiant splendor. It is magnificence. It is greatness. They said, Lord, you're worthy to receive radiant splendor and greatness. You are worthy to receive honor. The word honor literally means price or value of something. We're back to that value thing. In the first century, when it was a slave-infested society, the Romans had slaves. There were millions of them. And they would talk about the honor of a slave. The honor of the slave was how much was paid for it. That was his honor, the value, the financial value. You're worthy to receive value. You are worthy to receive power, and that's power to rule, sovereignty, authority. But let me ask you something. Doesn't the risen and ascended Jesus, who is on the throne of the universe, doesn't he already have those things? I mean, what glory and radiance does he have? He has more glory and more radiance than the entire universe that he created, and he sustains every single moment of every single day. He's more glorious than all of that. What honor does he have? How valuable is he? He's immeasurably valuable because he's the creator and he is the owner of every precious jewel, every diamond, every ruby, every ounce of gold, every ounce of silver and precious metal. He made it all. He owns it all. All things were made by him and for him. How valuable is he? Infinite value. What authority does he have? He's on his throne. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords, the King of the universe. So why declare that to him? That leads us to the last and maybe the most important question. What is the form of your worship? What form does your worship take? What form should your worship take? You know, biblically, there were a lot of different ways people worshiped in the Bible. As we read through our Bible, we find people worshiping by singing and by praying and by reading and by standing and by bowing and by sometimes jumping up and down in excitement and shouting and sometimes quietly meditating, and on we could go. So we ask ourselves the question, so which form of worship is the best? Well, the answer to that simply is any or all of them that do one thing. Any or all of them that facilitate giving what we have to Christ, because that's what he's worth to us. You know, the words that the elders speak in verse 11 really are just reflections and explanations of the actions that are recorded for us in verse 10. And that's interesting. When we see those actions compared to verse 4, we start to understand what true worship is about. Let's go back to verse 4. It says, surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on those thrones were 24 elders. But look what it says in verse 10. The 24 elders When they're in the presence of Jesus, when they're in that worship setting, what do? They fall down before him who sits on the throne, and they worship him. They get down off of their thrones and to worship him. In order to worship him, they give up their positions of glory and greatness, and they give those to Jesus because that's what they've got. And so to experience wonder-filled worship, we must do so in ways that give God our glory, that give God our pride, that give God our spotlight. And did you notice that these guys, they didn't just step down from their thrones, they fell down from their thrones. They laid flat on the ground, face down, worshiping, because that's the posture of humility. That's the posture of servanthood. They give up their honor and their pride and their self-esteem and humbly give those to Jesus. Everything they had. To experience wonder-filled worship, we've got to give Jesus our glory, our honor. Again, in verse 4, second part of the verse, these elders, they were dressed in white, and they had crowns of gold on their head. By the way, their only possession when they got to heaven, crowns of gold. What did they do with them? It says in verse 10, they lay their crowns before the throne and say, you are worthy, God, to receive our honor and power. They gave up their authority and their right to rule and gave that right to Jesus. Jesus, I worship you by giving you control over my whole life. I give you my power. We must give him our power. You see, worship is so much more than words. Worship is so much more than just singing. We do that so we can give to him ourselves, our all, everything. Why? Because he's worthy. So how much is Jesus worth to you today? I wish we could kind of back up and start the worship service over again so that we could sing those songs and give those gifts, because we want to say to him, Jesus, this is what you are worth to me. I want to give myself to you because you are worthy of my all. You are my all. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain so I could be redeemed and reconciled and spend eternity in glory with him. So today, as we stand once again, we're going to give an opportunity to not just talk about it, we're going to give an opportunity to put it into practice. So let's stand. And as we sing this song, will you give yourself to Jesus? And however you want to express that. Maybe you want to say it by bowing down and say, Lord, you can have my all, like those elders. I want to be on my face. I give you my all. Maybe God will move you to say it by just jumping up and down in excitement, or raising your hands, or however you want to do it. But let's do it as we worship him like those angels did in the book of the Revelation. Let's worship.
As a church, it's our honor to play a small part in what God is doing through your life, and we would love to continue on that journey with you. To find out what your next steps could be in your relationship with Christ, all you have to do is go to mynsc.org/contact. Thank you to all of you who consistently give, serve, and pray. You are the ones who God is using to make a difference in our community as we live out our mission of leading people to become fully devoted followers of Christ. Thank you for watching. We hope you tune in next week.